This story is very meaningful. Everyone should hear it. Listen to Brian tell the story. I knew my marriage was over the moment I saw the way he looked at her. We were at a fundraising gala, an event that I had dressed up for, hoping to impress, hoping to fit into his world. Jack was next to me, holding my hand loosely, distracted. Then she walked in. Emma, tall, blonde, striking in a way that turned heads effortlessly. Jack's grip on my hand tightened for a moment, then he let go. Emma, he breathed, as if her name alone carried the weight of old memories and lost time. She smiled, but it wasn't at me. It was at him. So this is her, she said, eyes flicking toward me. They weren't joking when they described you. A small, hollow laugh. Jack didn't defend me. He just changed the subject, asking her how long she'd be in town. They started talking, no, reminiscing about the past, about shared jokes, about the places they used to go. I was standing right there, but I might as well have been invisible. I made myself walk away. I wasn't going to stand there nodding politely while my husband and his ex-girlfriend had their own little reunion. I found other people to talk to, but my mind stayed on them. Jack laughing, Jack leaning in just a little too close, Jack looking at her like she was something precious he had lost. That night when we got home, I waited. Maybe he would apologize. Maybe he would say something to acknowledge how it must have felt for me to stand there watching. Instead, he sat on the couch, loosened his tie, and said, I think I should have dinner with Emma while she's in town. My stomach dropped. You mean we should have dinner with her? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. No, he said, shaking his head. Just the two of us. I stared at him. Like a date? He scoffed. No, just two old friends catching up. Why are you acting so insecure? Do you miss her? I asked, feeling the words choke me. Do you miss being with her? He hesitated. Then without looking at me, he said, It felt good talking to her tonight. There's just something about her. The words crushed me. I took a breath, forcing myself to stay calm. If you go to this dinner, I'm done. He looked at me, genuinely surprised. You're overreacting. I walked away before I could say something I'd regret. I didn't sleep that night. I stared at the ceiling, my mind running in circles, replaying everything he had said. The way he had looked at her, the way he had brushed me off like my feelings were nothing. I wanted to believe he wouldn't actually go. I wanted to believe that after everything we had been through, after 6 years together, he wouldn't choose her over me. But deep down, I already knew the answer. When he left for work in the morning, he kissed me on the cheek like nothing had happened. See you tonight, he said. I didn't say anything back. I watched him walk out the door, and the moment it shut behind him, I felt my chest tighten. I wanted to scream, to cry, to break something. But instead, I just sat there, staring at the spot where he had been. All day, I tried to push it out of my mind. I went to work. I smiled at patients. I pretended that everything was fine. But inside, I was unraveling. When he didn't text me all day, I knew. When he didn't come home on time, I knew. I could have tracked his location. I could have called him, confronted him, but I didn't. I waited. When he finally walked through the door just past midnight, I was still sitting in the living room. He looked surprised to see me awake. You didn't have to wait up, he said, setting his keys down. Where were you? I asked. He sighed. I told you I had dinner with friends. Friends? I repeated. Or Emma. He pulled out his phone, showing me pictures of a group at a restaurant. There was Emma, but there were also his childhood friends, the same ones who had never really accepted me. See, he said, nothing to worry about. For a second, I felt relieved, stupidly relieved. And then he said, but we need to talk. I felt my stomach sink. He sat down across from me, running a hand through his hair. He looked hesitant, almost guilty. After seeing Emma at the gala, he said, I haven't been able to stop thinking about her. His words felt like a knife in my chest. So you took time off work, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You spent the whole day with her while I thought you were at work. He nodded, not even trying to deny it. It wasn't planned, he said quickly. It just happened. I swallowed the lump in my throat. And, I said, barely breathing. He exhaled slowly. I realized something. I never felt that spark with you. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. Jack, I said, my voice shaking, you married me. I know, he said. I thought I was making the right choice. I thought what we had was enough, but after these past 2 days, I can't lie to myself anymore. My hands were shaking. I clenched them into fists, trying to keep control. Did you sleep with her? I asked. He didn't answer. Jack, I said, my voice rising, did you sleep with her? He looked away, and that was my answer. A hollow feeling settled in my chest. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to cry until there was nothing left inside me. But instead, I just sat there, staring at him. The man I had spent 6 years building a life with. The man who had just confirmed, without saying a single word, that everything we had meant nothing to him anymore. Why did you marry me? I whispered, my voice barely holding together. He sighed, rubbing his face. I thought I was ready. I thought you were the right choice, but seeing Emma again, it made me realize I was just settling. Settling, the word cut deeper than anything else he had said. So what now? I asked. You're just going to run back to her? Pick up where you left off like I was just a placeholder? I don't know, he admitted, but I know that I can't keep pretending. I laughed, a bitter, broken sound. You can't keep pretending? Jack, I spent 6 years by your side. I was there for you when no one else was. When you were sick, when you lost your job, when your so-called friends still called me the rebound girl behind my back. I stayed. He swallowed hard. I know. And where was Emma, I demanded. When you needed someone, when you were struggling, did she call? Did she check in on you? He said nothing. That's what I thought, I spat. But the second she walks back into your life, you just forget all of that, forget me? His jaw tightened. It's not that simple. No, it is, I said, standing up. It's actually really fucking simple. You want her? Fine, you can have her. But you don't get to sit here and act like you're some noble guy just trying to follow his heart. You lied to me. You betrayed me. And you don't even have the decency to admit it. He flinched. I never wanted to hurt you. I let out a short, humorless laugh. Well, congratulations, Jack, because you did. I turned away before he could say anything else. Where are you going? He asked. To bed, I said flatly. And in the morning, I'm calling a lawyer. His face paled. Can we just talk about this first? I stopped at the doorway, looking back at him one last time. We just did. Then I walked away. The next few days were a blur. I didn't cry money. Not at first. I felt too numb, too exhausted. I went through the motions, making calls, scheduling appointments. I met with a lawyer. I started looking for apartments. Jack, meanwhile, acted like nothing had changed. He still came home, still slept in our bed while I stayed in the spare room. He still made coffee in the morning, still watched his stupid shows on the couch like he hadn't just blown our entire marriage to pieces. But then, 3 days later, he dropped another bombshell. Emma's coming over, he said casually as I walked into the kitchen. I stopped in my tracks. Excuse me? She's in town for a little longer, and I figured, you figured you'd bring her into our house? I cut him off, my voice sharp. The house we bought together? The house I still live in? He had the audacity to look annoyed. It's my house, too. Not for long, I shot back. He sighed, rubbing his temples. Look, I didn't think it would be a big deal. She just needs a place to stay for a few days. I stared at him, my hands shaking. You want to move your mistress into our home while we're still married? She's not my mistress, he said defensively. Oh? So you just happened to reconnect with your ex, cheat on me, and now she magically needs a place to stay? Do you even hear yourself? He scowled. You're being dramatic. I couldn't believe this. I actually couldn't believe the sheer audacity of this man. Fine, I said, my voice cold. You want to play house with her? Do it somewhere else, because I'm done. I walked out before he could respond. But this time I wasn't just walking away. I was leaving for good. The next morning, I packed my bags. I didn't make a scene. I didn't yell. I didn't break down in front of him. I simply gathered my things, called my brother, and told him to come pick me up. Jack was in the kitchen when I dragged my suitcase to the front door. He looked up, frowning. What are you doing? I zipped up my jacket. What does it look like? His expression shifted from confusion to something that almost resembled panic. You're really leaving? I let out a slow breath. You made your choice, Jack. Now I'm making mine. Come on, let's just talk. We already did, I said, cutting him off. You don't love me. You never really did you? I was just convenient. Someone to fill the space until she came back. His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue, because we both knew it was true. I opened the door, but before I could step outside, he said something that almost made me turn back. I didn't mean for it to end like this. I gripped the door handle tightly. Yeah, I whispered. Me neither. Then I walked out. Moving out was the easy part. It was the aftershocks that nearly broke me. I spent the first few nights at my brother's place, curled up in a guest bed that smelled like fabric softener and unfamiliarity. I stared at the ceiling, replaying every moment, every conversation, every sign I had ignored over the years. The first time his friends called me the rebound girl, and he laughed instead of correcting them. The way he never really defended me when they mocked me for being just a nurse while he had his PhD. The way he always seemed just a little absent, even when he was right beside me. God, I had been so blind. You need to eat, and my brother said one evening, setting a plate in front of me. I poked at it with my fork. I'm fine. He sat across from me, arms crossed. You're not fine. You're heartbroken. I let out a humorless laugh. I should be angry, right? Furious? But I just feel empty. Give it time, he said. You'll get there. Time. Well, the anger didn't come all at once, and it crept in slowly, piece by piece, until one day I woke up and realized I wasn't sad anymore. I was livid, because while I was barely holding myself together, Jack was just moving on, like I had never existed. I found out through a mutual friend that he had officially gone public with Emma. They were traveling together, smiling in pictures. He looked happy. Meanwhile, I was working extra shifts to cover my half of the mortgage because he refused to sign the damn house over to me. When my lawyer sent him a bill for his share, he ignored it. When I reached out directly, he had the nerve to act annoyed. I don't see why you're making this so difficult, he said over the phone. You mean difficult, like when you cheated on me? I snapped. He sighed like I was exhausting him. We were already falling apart. No, Jack, I said, my voice shaking. You decided we were falling apart the second she came back into your life. You lied to me. You betrayed me. And now you're acting like I'm the problem? I just don't see why we can't be civil about this. I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. Oh, you want civil? Fine, sign the papers. Pay your share. Then you can go live happily ever after with your fucking soulmate. He was silent. Or, I continued, you can keep dragging this out and I'll take you to court. Your choice. I didn't expect him to back down so easily, but he did. Maybe Emma didn't like the idea of him still being financially tied to me. Maybe he just wanted to be rid of me once and for all. Either way, a week later, I got the paperwork. The house was officially mine. I stood in the empty living room looking around at the place that used to be ours. Then I picked up a can of paint and started covering every wall in a fresh new color. Because this wasn't his house anymore. It was mine, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. The divorce was finalized 6 months later. I thought I would feel relief, maybe even closure. But as I sat in the lawyer's office, signing the last of the paperwork, all I felt was exhaustion. Jack wasn't there. He had his lawyer handle everything, just like he had handled the end of our marriage, at a distance, like I was just another inconvenience in his life. I walked out of that office into the crisp autumn air, closing my eyes and taking a deep breath. For the first time in years, I belonged to no one but myself. A week later, I saw him again. It wasn't planned. I was grabbing coffee before work when I spotted him sitting by the window of the cafe across the street. At first, I thought he was alone. Then I saw her. Emma. She looked just as perfect as ever. But Jack, he looked different. Tired. Older. There was a weight in his expression that hadn't been there before. I almost walked away. Almost. But then she said something, and he rubbed his face, looking frustrated. Emma's lips moved sharply, her eyes flashing with irritation. Jack opened his mouth to respond, then stopped himself. looking away. It wasn't love. It wasn't happiness. It was two people sitting in the ruins of something that had once been a fantasy and was now just reality. He chose her. He threw away everything we had for a dream of the past. And now that dream was crumbling. He must have felt me watching because he turned his head. For a split second, our eyes met through the window. There was a flicker of something in his expression. Surprise, regret, maybe even a little longing. But I just smiled, took a slow sip of my coffee, and walked away. That was the last time I ever saw him. Some endings aren't meant to be explosive. Sometimes the real satisfaction isn't in revenge, but in knowing that you survived. That you walked through the fire and came out the other side stronger. I built a new life, a better one. I traveled. I made new friends. I laughed again. I fell in love again. And this time it wasn't because I was someone's second choice. Jack, I heard from a mutual friend that things didn't work out with Emma. Apparently, once the excitement wore off, she realized he wasn't the same man she had loved all those years ago, and he realized she wasn't the answer to all his problems. Last I heard, he was alone, still searching for something he had lost long before I ever came into the picture. So here's the lesson. Love isn't just about passion. It's about showing up day after day, even when things aren't perfect. It's about choosing someone over and over again, not just when it's easy, but when it's hard. Jack never chose me, but I choose myself. What do you think? Have you ever been someone's second choice? Let's talk in the comments.